Hey, this is Ron again, back in Maryland for the first time in, I don't know, a month, 2 months, and had a day to spend on the Rambler. So nothing earth-shattering. I just want to go over some things that I've done, some of the things I've mocked up and had to order, and I brought back up here to put on the car. Um, as you can see, this is a boat shop. You can see all the boat engines and stuff. So I'm not a car guy, but I'm trying to figure this out, like I talked about before. But on my bucket list to go drag racing. So anyway, this car is 450 miles from my home in Carolina. So I come up here about once a month or so. So I'm up here now, and I lucked out. Boy, the Lord gave me a 81-degree day. It's been out of this world. So I want to show you what I got done and what I'm doing. And the front axle was mostly done last time, mocked up and everything, and pretty much worked out. But I did a few things. So let me just go over what I've done, what I'm doing, and why I'm doing it the way that I'm doing it. Again, everybody has different ways of doing things, and everybody's not going to agree on how it should be done. And I think everybody should be respected on how they want to do something, as long as it's not unsafe. More power to them. But I'm going to show the way that I do it and why I chose to do it the way I'm doing it. I mean, because things have to make sense to me, and if they make sense to me, then I'll go with it. But anyway, well, let me see. Well, I've got the front, I've got the drag link and everything. I had to order the drag link and the steering arms and the tie rod end from Speedway. So that's and these plates for the spring, I made them. Now these perches for the spring, they are made to weld to the axle. They're made to weld to the axle, and there's nothing at all wrong with that. That's the way Speedway's designed it, and that's the way everybody does it. But I didn't want to do it that way, at least not for now. So I had some U-bolts bent so I could go around the axle. I've got U-bolts around the axle, and I made these top plates so this way I could bolt the axle up and not have to weld these right now. I can always weld them later. I can always leave them the way they are, or maybe put a tack just so they don't move. But I just don't want to weld them right now. One thing is, when the car is finished, I can put it on a front end machine and get the alignment that I want. I'm told that between 7 and 10 degrees positive caster is normally good. So I think I've got it set by 8, for my with my dial meter. Right now about 8 degrees with the car sitting on the ground. So I locked up the U-bolts, and we can drive the car and see how it does, and if we like it, lock it up tight there. And I could even put a tack, or I can weld it solid and take these U-bolts off. But I don't think I'm going to take them off, and here's why. I mean, back 45 years ago when we raced dirt cars, we would actually straighten the tubes up in the rear a little bit if they got bent while we were racing, by welding on one side of the axle tube. And if you're not careful, if you weld too much on this axle, it can actually pull the axle up. It can cause the axle to, when it cools, to bend. Speedway even tells you, make sure when you weld it you don't have any weight on it, because that would exacerbate the problem. But like I say, I'm not saying it's a problem, but that's the way I'm choosing to do it, and that's the reason why. But I always have the option to come back and weld it later if I want to, or just tack it and leave the U-bolts on it. Okay, the second thing is these perches here for the spring hanger. I just made some plates here because I wanted to spread this weight out on this frame section right here. So I made these plates and I bolted that on. I will add another, nutsert in the bottom. I'll add another nutsert in the bottom, so I'll have 2 bolts there. Plus, I'll do some chain welding on the outside of this, or some people call it stitch welding, or whatever. You know, when I get the car to North Carolina and get it on my lift with my MIG machine. I'm just trying to get the car so I can maybe put a junk motor in it for now and get the car to move around the shop. So when I take it to Carolina, I can move it in and out of the shop. It's not tying up my stall. So that's basically what I'm trying to do. And, you know, get the rear in it and drive shaft and just a junk motor so I can, you know, have everything mocked up and get the car, you know, so I can move it around. Okay, now here's, okay, the other thing is, there's been some controversy. I say some controversy. I mean, some people, I had one friend tell me I don't remember if I touched upon this before, so please pardon me if I'm going back over things and repeating myself. It's been a couple months, but this front spring perch, okay, one buddy told me to put the spring perch in the front and put the shackle in the back, and that's what I did. And since then, I've had several people tell me that I should have put the spring shackle in the front and the spring perch in the back. So I did some research on it. Like I say, it's got to make sense to me. I did some research, and here's what I found, and it made sense. Speedway says to put the spring perch, your spring mount, on the side of your steering, because that, you know, obviously, if your steering is on the side of the shackle, you know, your shackle stands a chance of having a little lateral movement, especially if the bushings get a little bit worn, as opposed to the spring hanger. So they say put the steering, the shackle on the side of the steering arm. So that's what I did, and that's why I'm glad I did it. I listened to my first buddy and did it the way he suggested, because that lines up with what Speedway said. The other thing is, I was told that this is not the spring hanger, where I can always move this a little bit. It's not a problem moving it. But I was told that there's not going to be enough clearance between the shackle and my frame if this thing were to come all the way back here and, you know, touch the frame and get a better shot. But I did a little research on that. Of course, ideally, you want this spring shackle to be at least perpendicular or a little bit farther on a plane from like the center of the leaf spring to the center of the bushing here. So on a plane about with the leaf spring, you want the shackle with the weight on it to be at least perpendicular a little bit more. So, and which this will be pretty close with the weight on it. If I'm not happy with it, like I say, I can always move it up just a little bit. But somebody said, well, this is going to be too close to the frame. I'm like, well, no, because Speedway says that the lower bolt on the spring, when you put weight on the spring, you're going to have between 1/4 and 1/2 inch travel on this spring. So you can see how much travel I've got here until I get even close to the frame. I got at least 2 inches. So I've got all kinds of room. So I'm happy with that. Again, if it makes sense to me, and you know, Speedway's been doing this stuff for many, many years, I'm going along with what they say, and what they say makes sense. Okay, what else are we looking at? I thought I was going to have a clearance problem with the tie rod in and everything, but no, I'm good, because after I did my caster, that gave me more room here. So, and you can see I've got the offset steering arms. I'm using the forward tie rod ends instead of the Heim ends. And with the caster, you know, roughly set, I've got plenty of clearance now. So I'm looking good on all that. So, okay, what else do we have? While I was away in Carolina, my buddy up here in Maryland found me a set of headers for 160 bucks. They're Hooker Competition Plus fender well headers. And those things are like 560 bucks, I think, in Speedway, just for the painted black ones, which is what these are. So he picked them up for me, 160 bucks, smoking deal. You know, they're in great, great shape. So I've been working to get the fender wells opened up for the headers. And of course, if this were a Nova car, a Chevy 2 instead of a Rambler, you know, this would be very easy, because this whole all this stuff would be taken off. You know, I could buy the frame section snub, and then you have the bar going up the bolts to the firewall, and you're done. You know, but it's not a Chevy 2. I'm not going to make a front frame section and all. You know, I'm going to use what I have. I want to keep a lot of this original unibody construction. I want to keep as much of this as I can for strength. I'm going to keep all of this. So you can see what I've done today is I started cutting out on this side, and this is the original configuration over here. Of course, you know, I was going to leave all this, but now I'm doing fender well headers. It's got to go. So I cut all this out, and I'm going to put a piece of metal at least up to here, and down here will be for the header opening. And I might even have to come back and cut more out, maybe about back to there, at least another 4 or 5 inches I might have to cut out, because I'm gonna set the motor back as far as I can against the firewall. You know, maybe an inch, half inch, whatever. You know, it's going to go back as far as it can against the firewall. If I have to notch the firewall for the ignition, you know, no big deal. But other than that, the motor is going to go back as far as it can, for obvious reasons. And okay, so that leaves me with the steering setup, which I've kind of got mocked up a little bit. Now what I've got a GM Saginaw 525 box, and they use those boxes in Chevelles and stuff that I'm told. They've been using them for, you know, a long time. So that's what I'm going to use, and but I've got to leave it at that for now, because I can't do anything else until this motor is sitting in place where it's got to go, and to find out where these headers go. That's got to determine where the steering shaft and steering column and all that has to go. So, you know, I've got a U-joint here for the steering box, and I've just got it sitting there. But until I have the engine setting in, tacked in, and know where the headers are, then I can proceed with the steering column. So here's what we have for the header. But as you can see, more of that's going to have to be, you know, cut off to allow the engine to sit back farther. So, and then what's not used, I will cover up, you know, and, you know, put metal back to try to make it look like it was, you know, never been cut out. So that's the idea. It's just been fun because there's a lot of curves and rounded places, and trying to get it so that it's nice and square and put a piece in it, you know, has been fun, but, you know, no big deal. All right, what else do we have? Of course, there's my serial number plate, so all that's staying intact. I'm not taking that out. Okay, the other thing, let me go to the back. The other thing I'm doing is I stuck the wheels on, and I got some slicks. They're 26 by 1050 M&Hs they're called, which they're okay, but I think next time I might buy one size bigger. I might buy some 28 by 12s or whatever they're, I think. So, but these look like they would do nice. These looks like they would do nice, but I think I'm going to go with one size bigger next time. But anyway, what I'm doing now is just mocking up. So that's why I stuck those wheels on the stock axle. That's the stock Rambler axle, just to give me an idea what width axle I needed. So what I have an 8.8 axle in Carolina that I bought, and I need to shorten it. So what it is, the axle tube is 6 inches longer on one side than the other, and the pinion is offset 3 inches roughly in the housing. So we're talking 6 inches offset from one side to the other. So if I shorten one axle tube 6 inches, that would put the that would put the pinion, in the center of the differential, which it doesn't have to be. I know that, but if I do just one side, I don't have to shorten both sides. Shorten one side 6 inches, puts the pinion directly in the center of the in between the axles, and I only have to do one side, and that would make the rear actually 3/4 of an inch narrower than what I have in there, which would be perfection. That would give me even a little bit more tire clearance between the outer sidewall and the quarter panel. Now, the only other problem is the springs, the leaf springs. Of course, I'm doing leaf springs because it's a gasser, And then the Gasser Club, I think you have to run leaf springs anyway, along with the 4-speed and all the other things that they tell you have to do. So I'm doing leaf springs. And, but the leaf springs have to be moved in 5 inches. So I'm getting ready to pull the leaf springs out. Now that I've got everything mocked up, I know what axle width I need and all this stuff. So I'm getting ready to pull the leaf springs out and take them to the spring shop that's been there since the beginning of time. And I think they're going to re-arch them and maybe add a leaf and stuff like that, because these things are kind of soggy and needs to come up in the air a little bit more. So they're going to look at them. They're 2-inch wide springs, and I've got the measurements written down. But anyway, those guys will know exactly what to do. But since I'm going to move them in 5 inches, I've got to redo the spring mounts anyway. So if we can put 2.5-inch springs or whatever in there, it doesn't make any difference. So I guess that's where we are. So even when I'm 500 miles away from this thing, which I am 99% of the time, I can still do little things at home, like I can order parts, or I've got the differential at home. I can shorten the differential. I can made the brackets for the front end, so when I bring the stuff up here, I'm ready to go. I can bolt it together and stuff like that. There's stuff I can do, at home, even though I'm not up here. So, but that's about where I am. I think total I've got about 4 days in this car. So, I'm not lighting the world on fire. And this stuff I'm doing is not brain surgery. It's just figuring things out as I go, and trying to make it happen. At 65 years old, maybe in a year or so, hopefully we get this thing done. Certainly within 2, but maybe next year we'll get this thing out on the track and have some fun with it. My arthritic knees will be popping that clutch and trying to do that Ronnie Sox thing like I used to do when I was a teenager. We'll see what happens. But anyway, what else am I missing? I can't think of anything else. Just getting ahead of myself, buying some goodies, going with old school gauges that go in the dash, and I got an old school mechanical tack, and I did order my motor, and it's hopefully going to be here tomorrow or Monday. So I'm hoping to take it back to Carolina with me, get it on my engine stand. But it's a 415 Dart block, a Dart Little M, Pro 1 heads, 11.4 to 1 compression, and it should be a healthy little motor. I mean, by today's standards, it's 550, 600 horsepower. It's not earth shattering, but you know, light little car, old school, 4-speed. It'll be fun, and it'll be kind of period correct because, you know, it's the based on the old Chevy block. It's not an LS motor, and it's not turbocharged and all that stuff. But for what it is, it should run good and sound good and give the old man a thrill. So that's where we are. I can't think of anything else. That's about it. Now you can see, people probably have to laugh at my 9-inch grinding wheel. Nobody uses a 9-inch grinding wheel. I went to work in a welding shop when I was 15 years old full time, and that's what I did for a year or two. Used a 9-inch grinder, one of those heavy things, full time, and a wire brush. That was my job. So I'm still using it on occasion. But actually, you know, it has its advantages at times. I mean, it's a good truing device. I mean, you can take that wheel, you know, big areas, and, you know, like do both sides, and you can actually true areas with. I like to use a new wheel because they're really flat, and you can even true areas. But so they do have their uses. Of course, that's not all I use, but that's what I start with a lot. And that's what I used on the frame. But you can see there's no gouges in the frame, you know. So I started with the 9-inch disc. So when you get close to where you want to be, as you get a tattoo of the thickness of the metal left on there, you stop and you use something else. But that'll rip the big stuff out of the way quick. All right, I guess I beat this to death. Till next time. Oh, and sorry for my raw footage. I'm not one of these guys that know how to do all this fancy editing and these, you know, cameras. I'm doing this on my cell phone. I'm using one hand and talking and no editing. I mean, it's raw, about as raw as you can get. So that's all I have. All right. Take care.